Pioneer Library System is proud to bring you this presentation of Nature's Best Hope by author Douglas Tallamy, recorded Sunday, August 21st in Norman, Oklahoma.
Nature itself is on the ropes. And it's on the ropes because we did not take Teddy Roosevelt's advice. Way back in 1908, Teddy heard that the state of Arizona was going to mine the Grand Canyon. So he went to the canyon, looked out over the edge, and he said, "Leave it as it is." And with those 5 words, he started the process of creating the Grand Canyon National Park. Well, we didn't leave it as it was. There's only about 5% of the lower 48 states that's anything close to its original pristine ecological state. And those are mostly mountaintops. And that's because we have logged the country repeatedly, we have tilled it, we have drained it, we've grazed it. We've got 770 million acres of rangeland dedicated to cattle. That's 4.5 times the size of Texas, by the way. And of course, we've paved it or otherwise developed it. We have straightened our rivers and dammed them. You can spell that any way you want. We have polluted our skies, changed our climate for centuries to come. We have drained our aquifers. We've introduced more than 3,300 species of plants from other continents, many of which are running amok in our natural areas. In short, we've carved up those natural areas into tiny remnants of their former selves. And each one of those remnants is too small and too isolated to sustain the amount of nature that we humans need in order to run the ecosystems that we depend on. So you might wonder why we've done that. I wonder why we've done that. And I don't know, but I suspect we thought that our nest, planet Earth, was so big we could foul it forever and there wouldn't be any consequences. But we were wrong about that, and that's why we're seeing some pretty scary headlines these days. Things like the insect apocalypse is here. What does it mean for the rest of life on Earth? Talking about global insect decline. Followed by this one. North America's lost 3 billion breeding birds in the last 50 years. That's 1/3 of the North American bird population, already gone. And now the UN says we're likely to lose 1 million species to extinction, probably in the next 20 years. It makes a nice headline, but it's not an option, folks. We have to make sure this doesn't happen. We depend on those species. We cannot live without nature. So I could go on talking about the pox that we humans have delivered upon the environment, and thus upon all of our houses. Little Shakespeare there. But that's not what this talk is about. This talk is about a cure for that pox. It's a cure that will take small efforts from a number of people like you and me, but those efforts will deliver enormous physical, psychological, and environmental benefits to everybody. And the first thing we need to think about is reducing the area that we have in lawn. We have now, that's a 2005 statistics, 40 million acres of lawn. I heard recently it's up to about 44 million acres of lawn in the US, dedicated to an ecological deadscape. Why do we do that? Because it's a status symbol. Now, we humans are not going to give up our status symbols. It's part of our makeup. So we need it for our status symbol, and we also need it to display our Halloween decorations. It's not that funny. So what if we cut the area of lawn in half? Let's say we've got 40 million acres. We're going to cut it in half. What if we take areas like this and convert them to this? This is a picture that Dan Getman, who I don't know, but he sent me this picture. He said, "Look, I'm doing it. I'm planting all these native plants in my yard. It was once a giant lawn." That would give us 20 million acres to work with, to use for conservation. And if we do this at home, we can create a new national park called Homegrown National Park. And it'll be bigger than the Adirondacks, plus Yellowstone, plus Yosemite, Grand Tetons, Canyonlands, Mount Rainier, North Cascades, Badlands National Park, Olympic National Park, Sequoia National Park, plus the Grand Canyon, plus Denali, which is huge, plus the Great Smoky Mountains. Add up all those parks, still less than 20 million acres. So Homegrown National Park will be the biggest park in the country. What do we get when we put a park at home? What do we get when we put some part of nature that's actually thriving where we live? We get the opportunity to interact with nature, to build a personal relationship with the natural world. Rekindle one if we had it when we were a child and then lost it, or a lot of people never had it at all. And you can do it at your own time and your own pace. All you have to do is go outside. Or all you have to do is look out the window. You can avoid crowds. If you go to a real national park, what was it, 375 million people there last year. It's free. There's no admission fee. It's never closed, no matter what pandemic comes down the pike. You can avoid travel hassles. You get to experience the natural world alone, which I think is essential to building that personal relationship with Mother Nature, not mediated by anybody else. And this is particularly important for our poor kids, who Richard Lewis says are suffering from nature deficit disorder. So we're trying, we get 30 kids, we put them on a bus with a teacher, and they drive for an hour. They walk around for an hour, and the teacher tells them not to touch anything. Then they get back on the bus and they go home, and that's their experience with the natural world, which I'm sure is better than nothing. But it's really been an experience with 30 other kids and a teacher telling them not to touch anything. If they have some part of nature right where they live, all they have to do is go outside and become friends with it. Alone. No parental supervision. Let them work it out on their own. They will come home again, I guarantee it. When we hover over our kids, we're sending a subliminal message, this is dangerous. We don't want to do that. We don't want to do that. It's so important for our kids because they are the future stewards of the planet. If they don't know that, if they're afraid of nature, if they don't love stewarding it, if they don't know how to steward it, they're going to be lousy stewards. We can't afford any more lousy stewardship. And maybe they will learn how to hunt lizards, which I'm learning from my own granddaughter, Zoe, who lives in Hawaii on a very small patch of nature, a little piece of lawn with a hedge. But when she discovered there are lizards there, little Anoa lizards, she sent me this picture to describe how to hunt lizards. You get on the ground and you cover yourself with leaves and sticks so the lizards don't see you coming. Then you crawl slowly toward the lizard. No smiling. This is serious business. You can wear your best dress, that's okay, but you sneak up on the lizard, you catch the lizard, you put it in an aquarium, you learn how to take care of the lizard. You learn how to be a good steward of that piece of nature. You fall in love with that piece of nature. And that's going to stick with you the rest of your life. I don't think Zoe's going to be crawling on the ground in her best dress catching lizards the rest of her life. I don't think. She sent me this picture not too long ago, so who knows what's going to happen with Zoe. But I guarantee she's going to remember those experiences in Hawaii. And she will be a good steward when she grows up. If you want your kids to do more than catch lizards, get Nancy Stranissy's Nature Play at Home. Dozens of examples of how to expose your kids to nature right where they live. And if you want to join Homegrown National Park, you can do that. Go to our website, homegrownnationalpark.org, and get on the map. It's free. All you're doing is registering where your property is, your location, any way you want. It could be zip code. You don't have to give your address or anything. And the amount of area that you're being a good steward of. Maybe you're going to cut your area of lawn in half. Maybe you're going to convert 1 square foot of your lawn by putting in an aster or something. It doesn't matter how big or small it is. Put that area on the map. Maybe you're conserving something that's not destroyed, a good woodlot in your backyard or something. And then your little area of your county is going to light up. And we're working with a tech company now to get the entire map to light up. So we can see, it'll be interactive. We can see where there are gaps. We can see which states are contributing most to this citizen science type of conservation. We get to see the conservation efforts expand and work in the U.S. And we get to see how fast that's happening. This is our attempt at social media. People say to me all the time, you only speak to the choir. You guys all the choir? I guess you are. And that's because it's only the choir that invites me. The other people, they just don't know. They don't know. So this is our attempt to get this message to go viral, that everybody is part of the future of conservation. We'll see how it works. We've got about 20,000 members of Homegrown National Park right now. Okay, we're going to shrink the lawn. What plants should we put in the area that we take out of lawn? Some of them, I'm going to argue, have to be what I call keystone species. Remember what a keystone is. It's a stone in the middle of the arch, the Roman arch. When you take that stone out of the arch collapses. Well, I call these keystone plants because they're making most of the food. If we take them out of the food web collapses. Just 14% of our native plants are making 90% of the caterpillar food that drives our food webs. So think of the keystone plants in the ecological house that you're building as the support for that house. They're essential. You cannot build an ecological house out of wallpaper. And that's what we've been trying to do for the last century. You're not finished building your ecological house when you have your keystone plants, but it's an essential start. So the question is no longer the dichotomy. Are native plants better than non-native plants? Ecologically, on average, they certainly are. But there are a number of native plants that don't contribute all that much either. So the question really is, do we want to put the plants in our yard that are supporting the most pollinators and the most caterpillars, or not? What is supporting the most, at least the most caterpillars at this point? It's one of the oaks, genus Quercus. Got 91 species of oaks in the US. I counted them up for Oklahoma. You've got 39 species of oaks in Oklahoma. You're doing really well. In the Mid-Atlantic states where I come from, they support 557 species of caterpillars, over 950 species nationwide. Tulip Tree, good tree, supports 21. It's a native plant, but it only supports 21. So there's huge differences among our natives. And of course, things like the ginkgo and the crepe myrtle, they don't support any. So our plant choice really matters. If you want to know what your keystone species are for where you live, go to Native Plant Finder, the National Wildlife Federation website, and Audubon has a similar website, by the way. Put in your zip code, and the ranked list of both woody and herbaceous plants that are best at supporting life in your county will pop up. So, we used to have the excuse, I don't know what to plant, what's the best thing to plant? We don't have that excuse anymore. We do know what to plant now. Focus on the oaks are almost always number one, depending on where you live. But on the right there, we've got a list of herbaceous plants. So goldenrod, asters, sunflowers. If you have just those three genera, not only do you get the most caterpillars for herbaceous plants, you also get the best support for specialist bees. Those three genera alone will bring more than 44 species of specialist bees to your yard that wouldn't be there if you didn't have goldenrod and native asters and sunflowers. So this is how we put it all back together again. We're going to shrink the lawn. We're going to put in keystone plants. We're going to invite a lot of insects to our yard to have a very healthy food web, and then we're going to kill those insects with our security light, which is not the goal. A lot of recent research showing that light pollution is one of the major causes of insect declines, particularly in the temperate zone. Those are all the ways that lights are killing our insects, particularly the moths that make those caterpillars. But this is actually good news to me, because we have to turn around insect decline. Not stop it, we got to reverse it and build up insect populations again, because they are the little things that run the world. And if we can do that by flicking a switch, we're getting off easy. It's easy to flick a switch. There's a lot of switches to flick, but we can do it. But I know what you're going to say. Well, I can't turn the light out over my garage or over my barn or over my front porch because the bad man will come. Okay, put a motion sensor on it, so it only turns on when the bad man does come. And when he goes away, it turns off again. And the first thing you're going to notice is the bad man doesn't come very often. And if you don't want to do that, take the white bulb out of your security light and put in a yellow bulb. A yellow LED is best, because nocturnal insects are far less attractive to yellow wavelengths than they are to white or blue wavelengths. So it's a very simple fix. If we all switched out our white lights for yellow lights overnight, we would save millions of insects and also millions of dollars if we use those LEDs. All right, we're going to shrink the lawn. We're going to put in keystone plants. We're going to turn out our lights. And then we're going to invite Mosquito Joe to come kill all our insects. Booming business around the country. But Mosquito Joe says it's okay because what he's fogging is a natural product. And it is. It's pyrethroids, that's the same compound found in chrysanthemums. It's industrial strength pyrethroids. And of course, the pyrethroids are in the chrysanthemums to kill anything that eats a chrysanthemum. But I don't like that argument because cyanide is also a natural product. So I don't think it's a good argument. He also says it only kills mosquitoes. And I wish he was right about that. But he's not. It kills all the insects it comes in contact with, including monarchs. There was a big monarch kill, I think not far from here, a couple of years ago. Hundreds of dead monarchs on the ground as they migrated through Mosquito Joe. The ironic thing is it does not control mosquitoes. You don't control mosquitoes in the adult stage. You control them in the larval stage. In order to control mosquitoes in the adult stage, you have to kill 90% of them. Mosquito Joe kills between 10 and 50% on a good day, which means he has to keep coming back and fogging again and again and charging you over and over again. If you really want to control mosquitoes, target the larvae, what you do is get a bucket, fill it full of water. People say, how big a bucket? I don't care. Get a bucket, fill it full of water, put in some organic matter, a handful of straw or hay or some dead leaves, even dead grass. Put it out in the sun, and in a couple days it will build up populations of diatoms and algae, and that is what mosquito larvae eat. The adult female mosquitoes that are flying around looking for a place to lay their eggs, they're really drawn like a magnet to your bucket because it's got everything they want. They lay their eggs in your bucket. Then you go to the hardware store and you buy mosquito dunks. You get a sheet of mosquito dunks. I think it costs $9 or something. That's Bacillus thuringiensis. It's, and this formulation is designed to only kill aquatic diptera. And the only aquatic diptera in your bucket is a mosquito larva. So it's very targeted. If a dragonfly gets in there, and dragonfly larvae, by the way, eat mosquito larvae, it won't hurt them. If your dog drinks it, it won't hurt it. You might put a coarse screen over your bucket so your chipmunk doesn't dive in. Targeted, cheap, and if everybody did it, it would really reduce the mosquito populations without killing everything else. But you know what? If you're going to have a party in your backyard, you're worried about the mosquitoes, get a fan. Cheap, easy, you create a gentle breeze and the mosquitoes don't fly through it. They'll stay beyond it. That's the easiest solution. All right, fourth thing we need to do is to landscape in a way that allows those all-important caterpillars to complete their development. What do I mean by that? I live in Chester County, Pennsylvania. This is just an example, but oaks in Chester County, Pennsylvania support 511 species of caterpillars. A few of them, like the Polyphemus moth, complete their development on the tree. The caterpillar eats the leaves, then it spins a cocoon and hangs from one of the branches, then it emerges as an adult, and then it does it all over again. Everything happens on the tree. But most species don't do that. That's an exception. Most species they finish their growth as a caterpillar on the tree, and then they drop from the tree, and they wiggle their way beneath the soil in order to pupate under the soil. But the soil can't be really compacted for them to do that. Or they spin a cocoon in the leaf litter that's under the tree. And that's the problem. The soil is compacted under our trees because we mow and trample it, and there is no leaf litter under our trees. And this is a typical way that we landscape across the country. I'm convinced that this is another major cause of insect declines. And of course, the cement landscape is not going to do it for those caterpillars either. This is what most people do. They have a tree in a lawn. I've got a new grad student this year who's starting to measure how well caterpillars do in a situation like that, but I guarantee they're going to do better in a situation like this, where you have a tree and then a layered landscape. Maybe a dogwood and a native azalea and then ferns and ground cover. It's a soft landing. As caterpillars come down, the soil is not compacted. They can easily get beneath the soil surface. They can spin a cocoon in the leaf litter that's definitely there. And it's a great way to reduce the amount of lawn you have. Put a bed. I mean, we're not talking about less gardening here. We're talking about more. You can do all your fancy spring ephemeral gardening. And when you put beds around your trees, you have decreased the amount of lawn that's there. And the trees will love it, by the way. The trees do not want grass to go right up to them. You can use your native ground covers, things like wild ginger, native pachysandra. There's the Virginia creeper that nobody likes, but it's a great ground cover. Golden seal, May apples, foam flower, ferns, lots of choices for ground covers. If you can see your ground, you don't have enough plants there. And it also minimizes your weeding because you've covered the ground. But the caterpillars will love it. Okay, another former grad student, Desiree Narango, did some wonderful work with chickadees in the suburbs of Washington, D.C., and some of her results suggest that there is room for compromise in our plant choices, and that's good. Compromise is a good thing. She had one simple question: how well do chickadee populations do in landscapes that are dominated by native plants versus landscapes that are dominated by introduced ornamentals? This was in typical suburban yards in Washington, D.C. And the first thing she found is that when they're dominated by introduced plants, they support 75% fewer caterpillars. So right away, you've reduced the amount of bird food by 75%. Those landscapes were 60% less likely to have breeding chickadees at all. All the houses had nest boxes up, but the chickadees would come and look around and say, there's not enough food here, I'm not even going to try to breed. If they did try to breed, they laid 1.5 fewer eggs. Those clutches were 29% less likely to survive. If they did survive, they produced 1.2 fewer fledglings, and it took them 1.5 days longer to leave the nest. And if you put all that information into a population growth model as a function of the percentage of non-native woody plant biomass in your yard. And we looked at woody plants because that's where chickadees forage, on woody plants. That's what you get. The dotted line across the middle there is replacement rate. That is the rate at which the population has to make babies to replace the adults that die every year. If you breed at that rate, you have a sustainable population. It's not growing, but it's not shrinking either. If you make more babies than adults die, that area of blue above the dotted line, then you have a growing population. If you make fewer babies below the dotted line, you have a shrinking, unsustainable population. You can see where those lines intersect. It's, generously speaking, around 30% of your landscape can be non-native woody plant biomass without destroying the local food web. Now, none of those plants, we can't tolerate invasive species because invasive species don't stay in your yard. They're ecological tumors that escape and castrate the local ecosystem. But a lot of our ornamentals are not invasive, and we can use them without destroying the local food web. So that's the area of compromise that I'm talking about. And you know, that's important. If I said you can't use any non-native plants, then I wouldn't even have a choir. I mean, they're beautiful, and a lot of people want to use them at least to some degree. So remember Dan Getman? That tree all the way to the left there is a ginkgo. What's a ginkgo doing in his native planting? Well, Dan's wife said, I want a ginkgo. So it's in his native planting. Is it destroying the planting? Is it destroying the functionality of that yard? No. It's taking up a little bit of space. It's just there, but it's relatively inert, at least in terms of food webs go. So I always think of it as if it's a statue. So there you go. You can have some statues in your yard. It's not the presence of non-native plants that destroys food webs. It's the absence of those contributors. If we get more contributors into our landscapes, we can do some other things. Can we use native plants in formal designs? Of course we can. This is a Lynn O'Shaughnessy design. She sent it to me a few years ago. You don't get more formal than that. And every plant in that landscape is a native plant. That was taken by a drone 400 feet up. This is a Drew Latham design. It's much bigger. Imagine the amount of life in that one garden right there compared to the amount of life on the grass next to it. Seems like a no-brainer. Can municipalities help us live with nature? Yes, they can, and more of them are doing just that. Minnesota has been doing it for a while. There's a cost-sharing program where the state pays homeowners to reduce or eliminate their lawn and replace it with Minnesota prairie plants. Very effective. Everybody loves it. There's an island off of Florida that is encouraging people to allow burrowing owls, listed species, to burrow in the front yard. This is the way the Endangered Species Act should have been written, with carrots rather than sticks. If you have an endangered species on your property, we're going to pay you to be a good steward of that species, rather than fine you if you use your property. Everybody would want an endangered species. Put a bounty on invasive plants. That's what St. Louis, Missouri did, Fayetteville, Arkansas. South Carolina this is calorie pair, has banned them altogether. North Carolina has a bounty on them. You take out a calorie pair, you get a free tree replacement. Or give people $100 coupons to put in water efficient plants. Some public utilities are doing that around the country. And then, of course, the big lawn conversion programs, particularly in the West, In California, that $2 per square foot has gone up. It's now $3 per square foot. Every square foot of grass you get rid of, you get $3 if you replace it with xeric plantings. And if you want more information about all of those programs, memorize that. Okay, I think we made 3 missteps in the early years of conservation. And this first one is critical. We've started to think of nature as if it's optional. We like it, we like to visit it, but we don't really need it. You know, if it disappears, we can still watch David Attenborough, and it'll be okay. But of course, if it's optional, if it's not essential, when push comes to shove, when resources are in short supply, nature will take a back seat. We'll only fund the things that are essential. I went to the Cincinnati Zoo before the virus broke out, and there's this wall-sized poster there that to me epitomizes our society's view of conservation. We want to save nature, save wildlife, so that future generations can enjoy it. I mean, that's what I get from this message. It was exactly Teddy Roosevelt's message. We want to save these wild areas so that future generations can enjoy and appreciate them. There was no ecological message in there at all. But that just reinforces the notion that nature's there for entertainment. It is enormously entertaining. But we need to save nature so that we have future generations. We need to start to emphasize that part of it. We've also assumed that humans and nature cannot coexist, and we talked about that, but if we restrict conservation only to areas where there's not a lot of humans, we're going to fail because there are not enough of those areas, and they're too small and they're too isolated. David Quammen has a great analogy between a Persian rug and an ecosystem. That's a functional Persian rug. Those are not 71 functional Persian rugs. They're fragments, none of which are acting like a Persian rug, and that's what we've done to our ecosystems. The UN designates biosphere reserves as places of ecological significance. And I don't like that language because it suggests they're places on planet Earth with no ecological significance. Not so. Every square inch of the planet has ecological significance, including our yards, including our corporate landscapes, including our roadsides, even including much of our agriculture. So we need to put the plants back. We need to glue our rug back together again. Not just to make biological corridors that connect viable habitats with each other, but to recreate viable habitats where we've destroyed them. We're starting to do this. I'm seeing this accelerate. And when we do it, it'll be the first time in modern history that humans have coexisted with the natural world. Our third misstep was to leave Earth stewardship to just a few specialists, a few conservation biologists, a few ecologists. For some reason, we didn't see it as an inherent responsibility of every human being on the planet. But I don't know why, because every human being on the planet, whether you like nature or not, totally depends on it. We all totally depend on the quality of local ecosystems. So why wouldn't we all have the responsibility of taking care of those ecosystems? Stan Rushworth, Cherokee elder, once said, the mindset of the settlers was, I have rights. Mindset of indigenous people is, I have obligations. You're not born with those mindsets, you're taught them. We're very good at teaching about what our rights are. But we have been terrible about teaching our kids and our peers that we all have obligations to good Earth stewardship. Every one of us. It doesn't mean you have to save biodiversity for a living, but you can save it where you live. And if you do, it empowers you. Right now, so many of us feel powerless. The Earth's problems are huge. What can one person do? Well, one person can shrink the lawn, one person can turn out the lights, one person can fire Mosquito Joe, one person can put in a pollinator garden, one person can use keystone plants, one person can get rid of the invasive plants on their property. We didn't even talk about that. One person can do all those things and totally revitalize the functionality of their landscape and enhance their local ecosystem instead of detract from it. And it shrinks the problem down to something manageable, something physically manageable and psychologically manageable. Just worry about the piece of the planet that you can influence. If you own property, it's obvious. That's where you start. If you don't own property, help somebody who does. Help a land conservancy, help a park or preserve. They're all underfunded, they're all understaffed. They'll love you as a volunteer. So as a property owner or a volunteer, each one of us has the power. And we certainly have the responsibility to fix dead landscapes like that. Whether or not we decide to do so is going to determine nature's fate and then ultimately our own fate. Now, I think I've convinced my grandchildren that you are nature's best hope. I hope I've convinced you as well. Thanks very much.